Hello, I'm Siobhan Braden, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the Office of Child Care National Center on Afterschool and Summer Enrichment, or NCASE, to welcome you to today's discussion on supporting special populations effectively in out-of-school time programs. As part of Truth and Reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that I am participating from EDC headquarters in current-day Waltham, Massachusetts, which is located on the unceded lands of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts peoples who continue to live and thrive in this area. As you're joining, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know your role and from where you're participating. It's wonderful to see participants from California, South Dakota, Virginia, Oklahoma, and Alaska. Thanks a lot. Can you go to the next slide, please, Preeti? Many of you are likely familiar with NCASE, but for those that aren't, NCASE is part of a national training and technical assistance system funded by the Administration for Children and Families Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF, administered by the Office of Child Care under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This network of national centers supports states, territories, and tribes in implementing CCDF to provide low-income families who are working or participating in education with help paying for childcare. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Asia Foster and Mary Colleton, and we also have our colleague Preeti Washington helping us out today. Next slide, please. We're so pleased to introduce our guest presenter for today's session. Jenny Kozlowski is a passionate early childhood professional, author, and speaker focused on supporting children and their families during the most critical part of development. She currently leads initiatives focused on early childhood inclusion at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Jenny started out in the field 30 years ago, teaching a group of spirited preschoolers in an inclusive childcare classroom, and she's the author of 2 books, Every Child Can Fly, An Early Childhood Educator's Guide to Inclusion, and a companion guide for families, Empowering Your Child to Fly, A Family's Guide to Early Childhood Inclusion. You can find more out about Jenny and her publications on the Frank Porter Graham Institute website. And I think one of my colleagues will put a link to that in the chat. Can you go to the next slide, please, Preeti? So during today's event, we'll understand special populations and their engagement in OST, explore considerations and strategies for special populations, and learn about and share best practice examples. One of the things that we really enjoy about hosting these events is finding out what our participants are doing, what all of you are doing, because we know that you're all doing great work. Can we go to the next slide, please, Preeti? Now we'd like to hear from you. Mary, can you please launch our poll? There are 3 questions, so folks will need to scroll down to see all of them. Our first question is about your role. And then if you don't see anything on this first list that looks like your role, if you go down to question 2 and see if it can fit into one of the other categories. And then finally, we're interested in finding out your level of knowledge and awareness about the topic that we'll be focused on today. So we'll give folks a couple of minutes to complete this poll, and then we'll see what the results show us before we dive into our content today. Okay, let's give about 30 more seconds, and then we can close the poll and take a look quickly at the results. Seems like we have quite a mix of roles and also levels of experience with this topic. Okay, so is everybody seeing the poll results now? Can one of my colleagues give me a shout out?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a real mixture of roles, folks from CCDF lead agencies, some state education agency folks, some tribal CCDF lead agency folks, quite a few national technical assistance providers. Welcome, colleagues. We also have School Age Network, Childcare Resource and Referral, and a lot of program providers, staff, and directors. So thanks. And then thanks for clarifying if you didn't see yourself in the topic above. And then it seems like the majority of folks are moderately aware of the topic we'll be covering today, with then a mixture of folks being minimally, very, or not at all aware. So thanks so much. Preeti, can you go to the next slide, please? In our event today, we're going to share research, resources, strategies, and examples from this newly published NCASE brief and entitled, the same as the webinar, Serving Special Populations Effectively in Out-of-School Time. And as I said, we're also excited to hear from all of you about what you're doing. So Preeti, if you can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Asia, who is the author of the brief we'll be sharing today.
Hello, everyone. So to effectively support special populations in the OST space, it's essential to first define the diverse groups that fall under this category, as well as explore strategies that address their unique needs. So special populations is an expansive term that incorporates students with identified challenges that increase their academic and developmental risk factors. These students often require additional assistance to ensure equity and accessibility in the learning experience. These special populations are also inclusive of many who have historically been identified as belonging to underserved groups. These include, but are certainly not limited to, English learners, immigrants, refugees, and children with disabilities. Next slide, please. So first, English learners. The term English learner defines an individual with a significant challenge in reading, writing, speaking, or understanding English, and at the level that it inhibits their ability to learn effectively. When we think about dual language learners, this is a further distinction for young children ages 0 to 8 who are currently not only learning English, but also their native language. So some important points to note about English learners is that within public school settings, English learners make up about 10% of the student population. These individuals also come from a wide range of languages, cultures, and backgrounds that reflect the diversity within the group. The number of English learner students is increasing dramatically, and so this makes them one of the fastest growing demographics in the education space. Next slide, please. So immigrant and refugees. Immigrant is a comprehensive term that we use that's applied to any individual who has migrated from their country of origin for a variety of reasons. Refugees, however, is a special category of immigrants characterized as persons who were forced to migrate due to conflict or persecution. Within the United States, I think it's important to note that 40% of all US refugees are identified as children or adolescents. So this fits well within the OST space. Refugee and immigrant students also face numerous challenges as they try to adjust to life in a new country. These include things like cultural adaptation, where there are stresses as students try to acclimate to the culture of their new country, while also preserving their own cultural identity and heritage. There's also trauma and stress. So students who have immigrant or refugee backgrounds often have significant post-traumatic stress due to their past experiences, which impacts their ability to focus and learn. And then lastly, navigational supports tend to be a challenge as well. So there's a level of confusion in trying to navigate the complexities of adapting to a new school, as well as community environments. Next slide, please. So students with disabilities, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but this individual is characterized as someone who has a physical or cognitive condition that restricts their ability to engage in major life activities. There's an estimated 7.3 million students with disabilities currently enrolled in public school programs. Within the OST space, we found that 19% of parents have reported having a child enrolled with a special need or diagnosed disability. Enrollment of students with disabilities in OST continues to grow, but barriers to increased participation still exist. And these include things like lack of inclusive classes, limited qualified staff, and challenges with transportation. Next slide, please. So we wanted to spotlight an example. So we have a program example here from Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Cambridge Department of Human Service Programs Inclusion Initiative. And so the Cambridge Department of Human Service Programs ensures children with disabilities are uniquely provided for in OST programs, serving children kindergarten through K through 8 years old. Through the creation of this inclusion initiative, the department oversees the provision of reasonable accommodations for students with approved IEPs. And so the inclusion initiative has several provisions that are built into it. So these include things like increased program staff, modifications of program policies and procedures, diverse formats for written resources and materials that are used, changes or modifications to identified physical impediments to students, and provision of auxiliary aids and services. So we encourage you to take a look at the Inclusion Initiative program that we've highlighted here from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So the last category that we want to highlight is highly mobile youth. And highly mobile youth are a subset of students within the special populations categorization who experience frequent changes in their living conditions. These include homeless, migrant, and foster youth. So these students often will have indicators where they experience education disruption. They can often show lower academic achievement compared to their peers, but they can also have trouble acclimating to new environments. Next slide, please. So it's crucial, as we're talking about best practices in supporting special populations, that we acknowledge that students may belong to multiple special population groups simultaneously. And any considerations should be paid to these overlapping identities and distinctiveness. So establishing best practices helps us to bridge gaps in access and support. It enhances the overall quality of programs that are provided, and it contributes to the academic and social successes of all participants. So special populations can sometimes be characterized by their needs first, which often highlights the gaps in student abilities. So to counter this, OST programs should focus on offering a strengths-based engagement approach. So this strengths-based engagement approach should focus on several things. First is identifying the inherent knowledge and skills that students bring with them into programs. These student strengths and abilities can be used as a foundation for learner engagement based on what we already know about students. And it helps us to avoid this deficit-oriented approach that assumes that youth are lacking or at risk. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Janie.
Thank you. So I'm going to share some thoughts about working with families, particularly families of children with disabilities. And I would like to think about it as perspective taking, imagining yourself in their place. Building relationships with families starts with empathy. If we consider the perspective of a parent or a caregiver whose child was recently identified with a learning disability or ADHD, for example, the family might be uncertain about what that means for their child's future. They might be fearful that their child won't receive the right support, or they might still be processing the news and unsure of how they feel. So when students have struggled in school for years, their families may have had many negative experiences with the education system. And they may feel overwhelmed or judged by teachers in the past. So when we keep all that in mind, it can really help us to understand why a student or a caregiver might be on the defensive from the start. So if we make sure right from the beginning that they know that we're there to support them, it can go a long way. And remember that some learning and thinking differences run in families. So parents may come to the parents-teacher relationship with emotions all their own, remembering their own struggles and experiences in school.
Okay, so we're going to take a moment and talk about creating a sense of belonging. So belonging is important for all students, but especially so for special populations. So by cultivating a sense of belonging, students can be supported in building a sense of autonomy and self-empowerment. Programs can enhance this sense of belonging by embracing an assets-based approach to student engagement. So we've talked about not being deficit-oriented. So focusing on embracing an assets-based approach to student engagement helps with that. It can also help by nurturing student self-confidence and their ability to self-advocate, giving them opportunities to do so. Also providing chances for students to voice their preferences, set goals, and actively participate in decision-making processes. And then lastly, building agency among students both within and beyond that OST program that they're participating in. Next slide, please.
So what might that look like in a classroom? How do we create a culture in our programs of membership and belonging? And by membership, what we refer to is having the child and the family feel as though they are a member of the class. They're part of the group. And so I've got some photos here that kind of can show what that means. For example, in the picture with the paintbrushes and cups, it's an example of a mural. So everyone in the class is working together and everyone knows what the expectations are, and they are they're members in a club of artists in the classroom. And so this teacher set up a long sheet of mural paper to create a project that everyone helps create together. Another educator fostered a sense of membership by creating a family art quilt. So if you can see that on the lower left-hand corner, each family contributed a square of artwork with drawings and images from their family. So they created it at home, and then all together, when the squares were brought together, they make up an art quilt masterpiece that everyone contributed to. So in addition to feeling the sense of membership, as Asiya said, that belonging is also key. And there are many ways we can communicate to children that everyone belongs here. In this one example in the photo in the middle of the map of the world, can see this is from a program where families were from lots of different countries. And so the map that's in the hallway has thumbtacks in the different countries where families are from. And so it gives families a chance to get to know each other and also feel valued about the place where they came from before they ended up in the program together. And so it can also mean by belonging that our classroom materials include representation of different genders and races, abilities, family compositions, ages, and lifestyles. So they can include cultural artifacts or materials from home, like this mirror that you see up in the upper left-hand corner, or even just in the play materials over on the right-hand side. You can see that the little girl is playing with figures that represent all different kinds of occupations, races, and abilities. So it really does help to build belonging and create that sense of a culture of membership and belonging.
So it's really important to note that many special population groups carry with them trauma from multiple life transitions. This can affect their cognitive and social emotional well-being. Interpreting the impact of this trauma becomes necessary to making sure that we're providing high quality experiences for students. So within that sense, we want to look at trauma-informed care. And trauma-informed care is a comprehensive approach that really looks at a few things: providing collaborative assistance, establishing trust-based connections, nurturing both the psychological and physical security of students, and also promoting self-confidence. Next slide. As a component of this work with special populations, it's also important to make sure that we include families. So personalizing family engagement is important. Partnerships with families provide a valuable resource in making sure that we're developing highly successful OST programs. And these programs, when we're thinking about them from a family engagement perspective, they're ones that recognize family voice as essential in a child's education. It also is a space where families are empowered to take on an active role in decision-making and planning. And also, it provides an opportunity for OST staff and administrators to create relevant and individualized programming. Next slide, please.
So Asya, you asked me about how do we engage families in planning for children? And this concept of family-informed, child-centered planning can be really helpful. And it begins with identifying the key individuals that are involved in the child's life so that those relationships can be fostered between those key individuals and the people that are part of your school. And what's important is not only to identify what's important for the child, but we want to think about what is important to the child. You know, back to those comments you made about preferences and child strengths. And so we can identify what others need to do to support what is important to the child. We can recognize the child's talents and strengths as well as needs, and include the child's personal circle of significant relationships when developing a plan. So this family-informed, child-centered planning provides a process for bringing a child's team of providers together to discuss the child's hopes and dreams. Child-centered planning is in itself a strength-based process, and it's a celebration of the child and a mechanism of establishing the commitment of the whole team to supporting the child and family. It's about listening to the child, no matter how he or she communicates, and finding out what's important to them.
So let's talk a little bit about building collaboration across education spaces, which is very important when we're talking about special populations. So collaboration between OST and the traditional school day helps to expand learning opportunities for for students within the special populations group. And it also benefits both settings. So it offers a chance for information and data to be shared that helps to facilitate an efficient exchange of information. So, what's happening in those traditional school day settings should be mirrored within that OST space in ways that provide students with support. It also helps to eliminate delays in students receiving specialized provisions. So if information is being shared between both spaces, then so we make sure that there's no gaps in the services that students are receiving. And then it also presents an opportunity to further incorporate equity supports between what's happening in the school day and the OST spaces. So ensuring that students are not falling in the gaps and missing out on services and supports. Next slide.
Thanks, Asia and Jani. It was really helpful to hear those perspectives, and especially appreciate you bringing the early childhood perspective, Jani, in harmony with the OST perspective, because we're all serving the same children and families, right? Just at different stages of their lives. Now we'd like to hear from you. And before we jump into our Padlet, these are the questions that we'll be asking you to respond to. How are you supporting special populations in OST in your state, territory, tribe, district, or program? What barriers might exist in your system, supports, or programs that hinder the participation of special populations? And what recommendations and/or lessons learned can you share? And when we go into the Padlet, Mary's going to share it in just 1 minute. We'll quickly show you how to click on a plus sign and add your comment. If you're unable to use the Padlet, you can also put your responses in the chat. And it would be great if we used to ask people to reference specifics about their state, territory, tribe, district, or program, but actually we've been asked to share these Padlet results, and we can't do that if there's any personally identifiable information. So we're actually just going to ask you to share this information, but don't tie it to who you are, because then we can't share the strategies with others. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask Mary if she can launch the Padlet for us. And so I'm just quickly demoing how you can click on a plus sign and add something. You get a pop-up box, and you can put a subject, or you can just type something in the body, and then, but I have to type something, and then you get a publish button. So why don't we go ahead and give people a couple minutes to do this, and then maybe Jani and Asia, if you want to start sharing some of what you're seeing from folks once we've given them a couple minutes to do some reflecting, that would be great.
Siobhan, I'm seeing a couple of remarks about training and professional development, how important that is. Accessing professional development from a lot of different sources. And also partnering with providers that are intentionally inclusive and create programs for all populations. So remarks about professional development are really, really helpful.
And on the barrier side to things, we're seeing some around serving children with special needs, language barriers as well. And kind of in line with the training that staff are not equipped to meet specific special needs of the youth that they serve. So that is a challenge.
Yeah, the research really backs us up in this support of professional development, because what we have found is that educators typically want to support each and every child, but they need the strategies, and they want to feel competent and confident in meeting the needs of each child. So it's super important, if you are a leader of a program, that you're really strategic about how you offer those supports to staff, because it isn't typically about the disability or even about the child, but it's more reflection on the educator themselves and, feeling this need for additional support or skills and information.
I also noticed a couple of comments about the value of out of school time programs, staff being able to participate in IEP, individual education plan meetings with school personnel, as well as having access. So I saw that both in the supporting and also in the barriers, not having access to that information and to those connections.
Which becomes so challenging, Siobhan, like we were talking about, when you don't have those collaborations between the school day program and the OST program, that children are not able to access those same resources that they have, which then limits the ability for individuals to provide that additional support.
But gosh, when the collaboration's in place and staff are able to attend IEP meetings, I mean, we know that OST staff have so much to contribute to the conversation. And typically those IEP teams want to hear all of the different perspectives of the important people that are in the child's life. So as leaders, we can really make a difference by fostering those collaborative relationships. And it really builds the confidence for staff, and it's good for children and families as well.
I want to hop over to the recommendations, where someone's mentioned inviting youth and families into the design process. And in our brief, we do include a resource about human-centered design and how it is valuable in this conversation of serving special populations and including families in that process, but making sure that there's that duality of including both students as well as families in that process is really important.
I also noticed a shout out to supporting rural programs and making sure that they have the resources that they need.
I also love the focus on advocating for families and making sure that they know their rights in the IEP process, so that they're able to be more deeply embedded in those conversations of how do we make sure that children are getting all that they need to help support their learning.
Yeah, and we have a really great strategy under the first column as well from an inclusion specialist that provides free support for after-school programs about including children with disabilities and challenging behaviors across their state. So excellent example of a project to lift up. Thanks for sharing. Some really good strategies as well around figuring out what is going to work for that individual child and working with teachers and families to discover what works for them. They included calming strategies, what their interests are, if there are things that are might help to de-escalate tensions, to learn what those are. And really by partnering with families, we can fast track that knowledge. We can learn from families' experiences and build on that, and everyone benefits.
I also like the suggestion someone put in here about redesigning surveys to be accessible to all, as well as our survey policies, procedures, and funding. And this is a really important piece, that you're not only creating pathways, but you're making sure that those pathways are equitable for all of the shareholder groups that that you work with.
We just had a really interesting strategy shared in the chat, which I just added to Padlet now. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so now it's the first one. Funding opportunities. This is how are you supporting special populations in OST? Funding opportunities to support staff training, funding OST programs for youth to attend at no or low cost. Created a DEIA team, which I'm assuming is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and the team created a toolkit. So including youth engagement and involvement, along with providing staff training, sounds like a really great approach.
We also have a note about offering quiet spaces for children with sensory sensitivities and provide assistive technology for those with communication or mobility challenges. And sometimes it's the small changes that are made that really help to ensure that you're creating these inclusive environments. But those quiet spaces have value for so many special population groups who have a sense of overwhelm with their experiences. And so a great opportunity to give space for individuals to engage how and when they can.
I see a recommendation, I think it was the latest one posted, that really resonates with what both Asia and Jani shared about perspective taking and empathy with the families as the school year starts, and understanding where folks are coming from, and not going in positively. I mean, it's said really eloquently, and giving a chance to being supportive for families and children to support their success, which I think really echoes the strategies that both of you were sharing.
Yeah, and I saw there was also a comment about making sure that families know what their rights are when IEPs are developed. And there's a great resource that I don't think we included in the list, but the Office of Special Education Programs funds parent centers in every state. Every state has at least one. And if you go to parentcenterhub.org, those you can find a map of all of the different parent centers across the country. Type in the zip code and access those, get that contact information. And those are folks that have information about policies and resources in that specific area of the country. And so they can be super helpful for families, regardless of what stage they're in the whole process. Because our laws can be complicated, and children who are birth to 3 years old, and children 3 to 5 years old, and then children 5 to 21, they have different opportunities for services. And so those parent centers can really help families to navigate things that they're uncertain about.
Thanks, Jenny. I just put that in the chat, and I'm also going to add it to the Padlet.
Okay, great.
I noticed here that there was a comment about barriers to appropriate funding for programs to bring on staff who are trained to work with special populations. And there are several initiatives that cross workforce development in early childhood, where there is a greater push for refugee and immigrant families to come into education spaces as staff members, not only because they have those lived experiences, but also because they have the language. And those partnerships have been found to be really successful in expanding on the resources that districts and community-based programs have.
Thanks, everybody. We'll wrap this up in just 2 minutes, and then we'll go on to our final couple of slides. So really appreciating this rich conversation, and just want to give people a couple more minutes if you're still in the middle of typing or posting something. As I said, we'll share this after just checking that there's no personally identifiable information, because I know people find it really helpful to find out about strategies that others are using, as well as barriers and challenges to think through. Okay, so Mary, if you can stop sharing the Padlet, please. And Preeti, if you can bring the deck up again, we're going to just wrap up with a couple of resources and a request for your feedback. Oh, whoops, I was on the wrong screen. So all of the resources that we shared today that were references on our slides are listed on these couple of slides, and the deck will be made available to you along with the link to the recording of today's webinar. And we'll send that out. That takes a few weeks to be prepared and posted on the Office of Child Care Technical Assistance website. So you won't get that immediately, but you will get that from us. And if you can go through to the resources slide, please, Preeti. I think it's a couple slides ahead. Yep, one more. Great, thanks. So I wanted to make you aware, if you're not already aware, of the fact that NCASE does have a resource library, and that's a curated collection of resources, not just from our national center or from the Office of Child Care TA network, but from multiple sources and experts and organizations across the out-of-school time field. We update it quarterly, and it includes tips, briefs, webinar recordings, toolkits on a number of topics focused on out-of-school time. We shared our special populations brief today, and the content of this webinar was really based on that. And then we also have a link to our section of the Child Care Training and Technical Assistance Network website, which has links to all of our resources. So wanted to make you aware of that. We do update the resource library quarterly, and so there are always new resources coming up. And so folks have found that to be a really useful resource to keep up to speed on out-of-school time. And in addition to the resources that we provide in these kinds of events, we also offer at our center peer learning group opportunities and communities of practice for smaller groups of folks to work together on a specific topic. And we also provide individualized technical assistance to states, territories, and tribes on out-of-school time quality, equity, licensing systems that are inclusive of school age, and a number of other topics. Can you go to the next slide, please? We'd really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to provide us with feedback on today's event so we can continually improve our services. One of my colleagues will put the link in the chat, and we appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to complete this now. I realize we didn't actually give people time for questions. So if anybody does have questions for our presenters, you can also feel free to put those in the chat. We have a couple minutes left in this hour slot. So feel free to keep those coming. And thank you, Preete. Preete has put the link in the chat. And we'll keep the room open so that people can access that link, ask questions if you have them. And can you go to our final slide, please, Preete? We really appreciate all of you joining us today, and we appreciate everything that you do every day for children and families. So thank you so much for taking the time. And again, we'll keep the room open for a few minutes for folks to complete the feedback form and also to see if folks have any questions. Not seeing any questions yet, colleagues. Just folks saying thank you. And some folks are still with us. Some folks have signed off. So we'll give them a few minutes.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And Siobhan, thanks for inviting me to partner with you on the webinar. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Jenny. It was great to have you join us and bring your perspective. And we really appreciated it. So hope to have more opportunities to keep working together in the future.
Yes, thank you, Jenny.